Okie dokie. On the surface, Saya no Uta is, well, you definitely don't want to play it with your family. A really solid horror visual novel where you just watch this power couple decide to make their problems everyone else's problems as well. Just looking at some of the scenes here should give you an idea of how gruesome this game can get. Unless I had to censor them. But one thing that stood out to me is how this story actually deals with loneliness. How terrible it feels and how it's able to corrupt you, transform you into something else. For those that don't know, Saya no Uta is about this guy called Fuminori Sakisaka. He gets into a car accident that took the lives of his parents, and due to an experimental brain surgery, he now sees everything and everyone as walls of flesh. And not just see, but hear, feel, taste, and smell. All of his senses are screaming at him that he is surrounded by rotting flesh. Which makes for a pretty interesting gimmick. Poor guy is in a living nightmare. But it also feels like an extreme representation of being antisocial, along with antisocial personality disorder. See, if we look at the causes of antisocial personality disorder, while it's not exactly known for sure, experiences that are traumatic, like abuse or neglect, have been recorded as a potential trigger. And if we're considering trauma, then I would say losing both your parents and almost dying in a car accident is pretty traumatic. After the accident, Fuminori definitely becomes antisocial. Since he sees everyone as disgusting blobs, he starts to hate socializing. He's afraid of interacting with them due to not only how gross they look, but how putrid they smell, how slimy their touch feels. The fear that antisocial people feel towards the people around them, that trauma of social interacting, is being manifested into something tangible, something visible, turning the people you fear into actual monsters. Which also leads to Fuminori starting to dehumanize the people around him, the symptoms of antisocial personality disorder appearing the more the story progresses. Fuminori neglecting his school, relationships, and even basic house chores would fall under being irresponsible and neglecting to fulfill responsibilities. He stops being respectful towards others and even becomes aggressive, like how harsh he was when rejecting Yo. He takes advantage of and manipulates others, like luring Koji out to the deserted area so he could dispose of him. And then we have the combination of ignoring right and wrong, having problems with the law, feeling no guilt about harming others, doing dangerous things with no regard to the safety of others. Yeah, Fuminori eats people, man. We watch in real time as Fuminori's loneliness warps into something more insidious. And it's interesting that most of it is centered around his relationship with Saya, the only person that Fuminori sees as a real person. So, what is Saya? Well, she's not human. I think most people can figure that out at the beginning of the game. I almost called her a monster, but that's something we need to touch on later. The better question is, what does Saya represent? If we go back to Fuminori just being antisocial, before he goes completely off his rockers, his behavior is really close to what one might call a shut-in, or a NEET, not in education, employment, or training. He still goes to school, albeit skipping quite a bit, so he's not 100% a NEET, but if given the choice, he would definitely prefer to lock himself away, never have to interact with the disgusting creatures he sees humans as, removing everyone from his life except for Saya. And you know what NEETs are usually associated with? Anime. With all the time secluded from the world, they usually take on a hobby to entertain themselves, anime being one of them. So, Saya in this case could be seen as a corrupted representation of anime, specifically waifus. You know how people in the past used to say 2D over 3D, wishing to date anime girls over IRL girls? It's kind of changed over the years. The immediate example I can think of is that drama over Love and Deep Space, where some players would say that the men in that game treat them better than IRL men, which, honestly, kind of real. I play ZZZ because Evelyn and Lyra are hot. Well, that type of culture can be immediately applied to Saya, who is in fact a cute anime girl. The loneliness that a shut-in might feel ends up being projected onto something that looks human, but isn't real, which the story corrupts and turns into something else, using Fuminori's loneliness and how he clings onto Saya, someone that looks human, but isn't really human. That is the obvious metaphor that we could apply to Saya, but I actually have a different one. You could say a more modern interpretation of what Saya could represent. Instead of waifu culture, Saya could actually be the internet itself. Okay, I know it sounds crazy. I don't think this is the correct interpretation for Saya no Uta, but let me cook for a moment. Going back to what I mentioned before, if someone becomes antisocial, they usually require some other stimuli to replace the lack of social interaction. It might be anime, it might be video games, or it might be the internet. If you're scared of interacting with people IRL, then the next best thing is to just interact with them online. Anyone that uses the internet enough probably has an online friend, someone you're close to that you met through social media. You call them a friend, but for most people you probably only know them online, never seen them in person. All you know is this online persona of theirs, not quite sure what they're actually like IRL. Kind of like how Fuminori only sees the human version of Saya and not her true body. See, while the internet can connect you to amazing people, I hold a lot of online friends close to my heart. It can also connect you to other things. People that are lonely seek to fix their loneliness, to fill that void inside them with anything they can, and that can leave them pretty vulnerable. If you're willing to do whatever it takes to stop feeling lonely, you can easily become radicalized by people with dangerous beliefs. Fuminori's relationship is very similar to this, but instead of someone like Andrew Tate or Elon Musk, it's this cute anime girl that could do no wrong. Because Fuminori clings onto Saya so much, believing that she is the only person that can fix his loneliness, he very quickly starts to accept all of Saya, including her not-so-wholesome traits. When Saya eats Omi, Fuminori, who is unable to eat normal food because they also taste disgusting to him, unknowingly joins in and takes a bite, remarking how delicious this mystery meat tastes. The first signs of Fuminori becoming radicalized. Even when Fuminori finds out that what he's eating is humans, he does not care, as at that point, his mindset had already shifted into no longer seeing humans as humans, but as his only source of food. He becomes more and more accepting of Saya's cruelty towards humans, developing that same apathy when he finds out Saya experimented on Suzumi, when he attempts to dispose of Koji. Because of Saya's influence, along with his mental condition, Fuminori has been radicalized into viewing humans as cattle. There's also the fact that Saya is able to transform organic matter into whatever she wants, as we see with the research notes about how she was able to transform rats, along with the live demonstration when we watch Saya, Yo, and transform her body to be like hers, all so that Fuminori would also see Yo as human like Saya. Saya is able to remold things to trick Fuminori's brain. Which, if we take some liberties here, kind of sounds like misinformation, right? People taking something like news or studies, manipulating them in a way to fit an agenda, using it to radicalize understanding eyes into believing the same dangerous belief. The true ending, where Saya is able to use her abilities on a planet-wide scale, turning everyone into blobs of rotting flesh so Fuminori would see them as human, could be seen as how quickly misinformation can spread over the internet, corrupting anyone it touches. Playing Sai Uta reminded me of how people that hate on certain groups always seem to dehumanize them, spread lies about how that group is filled with criminals, how they're all a threat to your livelihood, that it's you against them. It's all really similar to how Fuminori sees humans, rationalizing to himself that everyone is out to get him and Saya, that the only way to live a peaceful life is to get rid of the nuisances that were once his friends. It's honestly terrifying how much this man has changed once his perception is distorted, perfectly happy to commit horrific acts, all to maintain his delusion of a peaceful life. All of it makes me question my own circumstances, how isolated I've become as a person. Am I also in danger of falling into the same delusions as Fuminori? I like to think I'm smart enough to not fall for misinformation, but can I truly know for sure? Is it just my paranoia, or is Saya out there, lurking on the internet, waiting for when I'm at my most vulnerable to corrupt me, transform me into something else? With all that said, I don't truly think this is what Saya is. I just wanted to share a interesting interpretation I had for the story. And honestly, I'm kinda neglecting something important with the game. While spending all this time trying to figure out what Saya represents, I haven't really asked who Saya is as a character. All I've done is reduce her to just a metaphor. Saya is not the internet, Saya is not a cute anime girl, figuratively speaking. Saya is a person. And Saya also experiences the same loneliness that we and Fuminori feel. It's easy to place a lot of the blame for the horrific acts in the story on Saya, saying she manipulates Fuminori into becoming a monster just like her. But it would be more accurate to say that Fuminori and Saya enable each other's worst aspects in fear of that very loneliness. When Saya experiments on Suzumi to replicate Fuminori's mental disorder, she does this to both help see if she can fix Fuminori, but also wishes to see if other people could accept her like Fuminori does. Which unfortunately results in Suzumi going insane and stabbing his family. When Fuminori finds out, he doesn't admonish her for a terrible deed, he instead places all the blame on Suzumi, saying that none of it was Saya's fault. Now, granted, Suzumi did also Saya, so it's understandable why he reacts this way, but Suzumi's crimes against Saya does not cancel Saya's crimes against Suzumi. Both of them are terrible people for what they did, and Fuminori is terrible for not only allowing it, but manipulating her into thinking that it's okay to experiment on humans, no matter how much she wanted to help Fuminori, or how much she wanted to be accepted by others. Now, you could say that since Saya could also be considered a eldritch entity, as we witness multiple times that people lose their sanity at the mere sight of Saya, Fuminori would only be enabling Saya because he too has lost his sanity. Which is true, to an extent, but we have to remember that unlike everyone else, Fuminori was temporarily blind when his condition first started, so his senses slowly transitioned to the sanity-destroying flesh world, allowing him to actually adjust to it, instead of being hit by it all instantly like the other characters. Also, Fuminori is still able to choose for himself. In one of the two only choices in the game, in fact, the only choice that we have for Fuminori, he can decide whether to let Saya fix him so he can see everything normally again, or stay as he is. The fact that Fuminori can decide for himself means that to some extent, Fuminori still has a will of his own, which means that he also chose to enable and manipulate Saya, not because he is completely insane, but because he does not want Saya to leave him. Saya also recognizes morals. We see this when she initially tries to stop Fuminori eating human flesh. But since she isn't human herself, she doesn't have the same level of morals that we do. Saya might be smarter than a supercomputer, but mentally she's still quite young. She only has a partial understanding of right and wrong, and is heavily impressionable and equally as vulnerable, allowing Fuminori to manipulate her, while Saya does the same to Fuminori. So Saya no Uta is both a story of how loneliness warps not just Fuminori, but also Saya. This couple using the fact that they're the only two people that are able to accept each other as an excuse to enable each other's toxic traits, to manipulate each other into a destructive, codependent relationship. Maybe in another timeline, Fuminori and Saya could have just become hermits in the woods, living off animals instead of humans, never hurting anyone, and just indulging in each other. I don't know if that's realistic. I don't think we've gotten confirmation that Fuminori could eat animal organs, or how long they could even hide from civilization. But in a story where everything goes horribly wrong, maybe there was another option. Maybe loneliness didn't have to corrupt Fuminori and Saya. At least, I would like to think so, to help me sleep better at night.